I would like to preface this by saying that I am not a longtime fan of DMC, and so please take that into consideration when listening to my points and criticisms. I am currently working my way through DMC 3, and have watched videos that go over the extensive lore and history of the games, so I am aware of how this version of the story differs from the original source material. However, please note that I use a very different metric for assessing the quality of adaptations. When it comes to assessing the worth of an adaptation, for me, it doesn't matter at all if it's faithful to the source material. There are many adaptations across media that are great, but have little or nothing to do with the material they are based on. Some examples include Avengers Infinity War, the How to Train Your Dragon series, and even the Lord of the Rings films. All of these projects heavily diverge from the stories they are based on, but that doesn't stop them from being great films in their own right. At the same time, there are shows and movies that are faithful to the source material, but are terrible regardless. Films like the Disney live-action remakes have been making a point to appear more like their original animated counterparts, but that doesn't stop them from being terrible films. All this being said, if you hear me making a comparison between this show and the games, understand that I'm not saying that the show needs to emulate the games word for word, beat for beat. If I do make a comparison, it is only to show how something the show does was either done better or worse in the material it is clearly inspired by. Saying the lore of the show is bad because it doesn't exactly match the lore of the games is not a valid piece of criticism. However, saying that the lore of the games was better because it serves the characters and the themes is a far more compelling argument than the former, as it points to the merits of the show being lesser than that of its inspiration. Now, with that out of the way, let's head into the review. Overall, I found Netflix's Devil May Cry anime to be rather frustrating, made very unenjoyable in terms of its lack of narrative cohesiveness, and with its themes and messaging. Let's start with our main character, or at least who we all assumed would be the main character, Dante. Dante, for the most part, is a very endearing character who I really wanted to get on board with, but many of the decisions from the writers gets in the way of that. Personality-wise, he's meant to come off as this goofy, wisecracking delinquent who's not as cool as he thinks he is. This is revealed in his introductory scene after he saved the woman in the alleyway from the demons. The woman's cringing at Dante's purposely lame joke is meant to clue us in that he's not someone we should take seriously, nor think is at all impressive, which I consider to be a shame. I'm not a fan of this trend where writers always seem to undermine their own characters and stories by using comedy in this way. A common criticism of this version of Dante is that his comedic nature comes from a very different source than the one in the games. In the games, Dante cracks jokes and acts unserious a lot of the time, not because he's trying really hard to impress anybody, but because it shows us how confident he is in his ability to face whatever threat comes his way. When Dante cracks a joke, it's with the understanding that he doesn't fear the enemy in front of him, that he knows how good of a fighter he is. Dante doesn't care if you laugh or not, the joke is enjoyable enough to himself. Doing jokes like this is the equivalent of a bad comedian preemptively laughing at his own bad joke in an attempt to save face, revealing his lack of confidence. This could have been forgivable if Dante's story was about learning to gain that kind of confidence. That doesn't happen thanks to the second problem with his character. There's a very clear lack of focus on Dante. For the majority of the show, Dante is sidelined in favor of other characters, such as Lady and the White Rabbit. Dante is oftentimes sort of just dragged along by the plot, rarely given a chance to make any kind of meaningful decision or get a clear grasp of the plot happening around him. Much of what happens in DMC isn't really a result of what Dante chooses to do, but more so what characters like Lady, the White Rabbit, and Baines choose to do. The people I've just listed mainly treat Dante like a glorified plot device, and thus, that's how the story ends up treating him. Almost no time is given to having Dante actually address and even deal with the conflicts that are thrown his way. The arc he's meant to go on through this show is dealing with the reality that he's part demon, an idea he rejects despite the clear evidence supporting it. This initially led me to believe that Dante's denial of his demon half, something that he would struggle with throughout the season, that he would, initially, continue to deny this fact about himself due to his viewpoint that demons are evil, considering what they did to his mother, culminating in him having to face, and on some level accept that part of himself as something, while tainted, can be utilized for good. Something I've heard is what he goes through in the games. Maybe he comes to learn more about Sparta and his decision to betray the demons, motivating Dante to accept his demon heritage. But that doesn't happen. Dante gets told he's a demon, hardly puts up any opposition to that idea, unlocks his devil trigger soon after, and doesn't harp on this new realization ever again. Dante's denial of being part demon wasn't based on anything personal that required a deep level of introspection, but simply that he was too stupid to put two and two together. It's an arc that skips past any of the actual interesting drama. There's no struggle to accept the truth, no internal reflection into his views regarding demons and their nature, and no dire consequences of him not coming to this conclusion earlier. Nothing. Oddly enough, it's Lady who goes on an arc of having their views on demons challenged, and that goes just as fast as Dante's arc. Imagine if the reason Enzo dies wasn't so much a result of him trying to defend Dante, but because Dante couldn't unlock his devil trigger in time to save him. Or maybe Dante does save Enzo, but only because he uses the power of the devil trigger as a sign of his growth after coming to terms with it. Unfortunately, none of this comes to pass thanks to the writers deciding to place a lot more focus and importance on another character. I did not have a good time with the character of Lady. There are so few redeeming qualities about this girl, I was almost convinced the writers actually wanted us to dislike her. First, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, her dialogue is unbearably edgy. I'm not saying that the character swearing automatically makes them less cool, but the excessive angry swearing this girl was doing was so grating it felt like I was watching an episode of Hazbin Hotel. And then you have her combat proficiency. There are so many instances where Lady should not have survived her encounters with demons. The bridge fight alone should have been the end of her, somehow taking on 5 superpowered demons at the same time, and not even getting a scratch. Add on top the fact that she somehow keeps incapacitating Dante despite his speed and reaction time, and I could not take seriously the janky power levels of this show. And then there's her interactions with Dante. Even when Dante is being completely reasonable with her, and she understands that he's not an evil person because of his demon side, she still continues to antagonize him. All this topped with the fact that she's the one driving the plot and giving way more of a focus over Dante, and you have the perfect recipe for an unlikable character. Yes, she has a very tragic backstory that explains her behavior regarding demons, but it's honestly too little too late. By the time we get her backstory, the episode in which she is forced to confront her preconceptions about demonkind has already come and gone, making her decision to change course all the more weaker than had we known this history beforehand. Overall, she's an obnoxiously annoying character, who, for the life of me, cannot understand how anyone could find appealing or likable. The White Rabbit is an incredibly flawed main villain. This show wants us to think the rabbit is somehow both an incredibly intelligent master planner and an insane sociopath who betrays his morals in the pursuit of revenge. To demonstrate how the rabbit is not as intelligent as the writers thinks he is, look no further than his introductory scene. When the mercenaries start looting the museum, the rabbit decides to just waltz in and steal the Force Edge, revealing to the man that it was in fact he who hired them to break in. But why does he do this? If all he wanted was the Force Edge, why does he waste time hiring normal human goons to break in when he has superpowered loyal demon minions to do it for him? It can't be to hide his involvement in the sword's theft, since he decides to show up himself and purposely leave a clue for Darkon to find Dante. And it can't be because the goons were more qualified than him to carry out the heist, since he single-handedly takes out both them and the guards and blows up the place. The writers think that the rabbit continuing to do these kinds of overly convoluted plans makes him look intelligent, but when you actually think about it, none of it makes any sense for him to do it this way. Then we have his backstory revealing his bond to the demons, and the reveal that he experimented on orphan demon children. How? How in the world does the rabbit square away this blatant contradiction in his head? How does he justify performing inhumane experiments on innocent demons who were orphans just like him, all the while believing himself to be the champion of the oppressed demon race? I know he claims that he feels all the pain he causes his people, but that is such a weak excuse for such a massive violation of his principles. The story tries to justify this as him being both insane and him wanting to seek revenge against Darkon, even going so far as to make it seem that his true ultimate goal is getting back at Darkon over helping his people. But why would he and the other demons see this as a conflict of interest? In all likelihood, The demons that work under him would probably support him wanting to destroy the institution, whose primary goal is their complete and utter eradication. Yet, when Lady threatens to reveal his vendetta against Darkon, the rabbit acts like it's some kind of real leverage he has against him. You know what else doesn't make sense about the rabbit? His plan. The rabbit's plan in the show is to break open the gateway created by Sparta, so that all the demons of his realm can invade the human realm and take over. There's just one problem with all this. Destroying the gateway would also allow the dangerous monsters of their realm to spill in and make Earth a dangerous wasteland, just like the demon realm, putting you back in the same position you're already in. This flaw in his plan is so obvious, even the laughably oblivious Dante points it out to him, only for him to say the death and destruction he would cause would only be temporary, and that in a few generations things will work out. How? And why hasn't the rabbit considered Mundus in all of this? It's explained in the show that the only reason powerful demons like Mundus can't cross over through the natural tears in the gateway is because they're too big, and that it would take breaking down the gateway altogether to allow them into our world, the very thing the rabbit is about to do. Does he seriously think Mundus is just going to ignore the opportunity to try and conquer our realm, when it's explicitly stated that's what he wanted from the very beginning? We know he's aware of Mundus since he mentions him during the video he made during the plane scene, and he never considers a way of preventing him from continuing to oppress his people should he succeed with his plan. Speaking of his people, so it gets revealed in this continuity that the denizens of the demon realm are not all inherently evil, contrary to how they are usually depicted in the games. Many of them are just like us, sapient beings with the capacity to be good or evil. The demons that Lady meets are in fact refugees hiding away from the far more powerful and tyrannical demons like Mundus. This is clearly meant to make the demons an allegory of foreign refugees running away from war-torn countries, seeking peace in another country that does not accept them. The problem with this is that it clashes with one of the main appeals of DMC as a franchise, which is to see Dante fight hordes of demons, much in the same way Doom as a franchise is also about a main character fighting through hordes of monstrous enemies. I'm not saying that a story revealing that an enemy faction is more morally complicated than they appear to be can't be done well, or that it's an inherently bad idea, but I struggle to see why it was implemented here of all places. The show wants us to view the demons in a much more nuanced light, but still have us enjoy watching Dante and Lady kill them en masse. We can't have it both ways. Are we meant to see them as characters or fodder? Then there's the fact that applying this kind of allegory to the demons is ultimately reductive. With the way it's handled in the show, this allegory is only used to make us feel sad for the demons, and nothing else. There's no exploration into the unique intricacies of this situation. Dante never actually meets any of these refugees or has a conversation with them, nor is there any exploration into them being fundamentally different from humans, some of which have magical powers that make them a formidable threat against humans. Without any of the examples I've laid out, the whole thing comes off as utterly shallow and without worth, leading us not to ponder or gain a better understanding of situations like this in reality, but to roll our eyes in annoyance at this sad attempt at looking like some deep message about the human condition. This leaves the overall message of the show very simplistic, boiling down humans as scum of the earth and the demons as misunderstood victims of our inherent cruelty. These themes don't reveal any sort of deep message into the nature of why these things come about, or explore the people who operate within these systems. This is just a naive, overly pretentious attempt at sounding complex, while putting none of the work into actually making it complex. I don't really have much to say on Vice President Baines. He shares the same issues I have with the White Rabbit, in that many of his decisions contradict his stated goals and beliefs. We see that Baines has a file on Dante, and knows about his personal history thanks to Enzo, so Baines should understand that Dante is no friend to demons. We also learn that Baines doesn't believe that Dante's demon heritage prevents him from being a force for good, and even tells Lady that he plans to recruit him. So then why does he decide to send a bunch of armed mercenaries to go attack Dante, instead of sending Enzo to just give him a job? You have poised your most prized asset to not trust you, and potentially place the world in great jeopardy. In conclusion, Netflix's Devil May Cry fails completely in just about everything it tries to accomplish. The characters are either unlikable or underdeveloped, its narrative unfocused and scattershot, and and it seems woefully simplistic as to come across insulting to the intelligence of its audience. Though I am not a longtime fan of DMC, it's never a happy sight to see a beloved franchise done dirty by a bad adaptation, and so my heart goes out to all you DMC fans. Hopefully, better things are yet to come for the son of Sparta. Until next time.